Please remember, the views expressed on Albertans in Space by our guests and host alike are opinions and do not represent the entire industry as a whole. Our podcast serves only as a platform, and all topics discussed are primarily for educational purposes only. Welcome to the first episode of Albertans in Space podcast, where we talk to Albertans who are making waves in the global space industry. In this series, we celebrate these passionate individuals on their current and ongoing achievements and look towards the future of understanding the space sector and Alberta's place in it. I'm your host, Zach Trolley. Albertans in Space is filmed in the city of Calgary on Treaty 7 territory. Traditionally called Mohkinstsis, we honor the sacredness of this land that belongs to many nations and peoples who make their homes here. And as taught by the elders, we take it to heart to take care of this land and never stop acknowledging the generosity of Mother Earth as humanity expands from this planet into space. And I am thrilled to have with me here my producer, co-host, and longtime friend, Meghan Westelmajer.
I am thrilled to co-host this podcast with you, my friend. As you know, I'm usually behind the camera, so having two cameras, a webcam, a sound space, and everyone looking our direction is a bit foreign to me. So I'll do my best. I apologize for anything that does come out of my mouth that is untoward.
Okay.
How does it feel? This is officially episode 1,
Yes.
season 1
Yes.
of Albertans in Space.
It feels great. I'm so excited to tell these stories. So many people, when they think of Alberta, it's cowboy, it's oil and gas, and that is true. We do that here, but we do so much more.
And you've never hosted a podcast before.
No, I've not. I've been on interviews. I've been talked at before, but this is the first time in this kind of setup. It's exciting.
It is exciting. It's nice to challenge ourselves to do something completely out of character.
It's what space is all about, challenging ourselves.
It's what space is all about. Why not exist in a new space, in a new world, so to speak?
Punny.
I ask myself a lot, what do I know or what do I want to know about space? Because I don't exist in the space world like you do. And when I think about space, I think about, first of all, it's overwhelming to know how old this universe is. How old isn't the Earth like a gazillion years old?
It's pretty close.
We're going to fact check that, but I think it's like a jillion years old.
It's about 4 billion years old. Yeah, that's a few generations.
So when I think about like our mark on this planet right now, it's so minimal, but yet so significant. And I ask myself, who is a part of this world and why are we going to space? Why is it important to talk about that? And more recently, you and I talking about Alberta's place in the space sector conversation. So I'm super looking forward to having in-depth discussions with our guests. We've had the opportunity to meet them over the last few weeks. And what I can tell you is that space is not just for billionaires with an escape plan. It's filled with people who want to educate, inspire, thrive, and explore the things we don't know anything about that we want to know more about.
The thing that's crazy is we use space all the time without even thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's got GPS on their phone. They're walking around. You can phone someone from around the other side of the world, and we just do that by habit. But there's thousands of people working on this, and a lot of them right here in Alberta.
Like I said before, I know nothing, so I'm a blank slate. You and our guests will be the experts. I will be the lovable layman, aka the comic relief, aka representing the demographic of those eager and curious to know more about all the goings on in what Albertans are uncovering in space, which is quite a lot. Spoiler alert, it's very cool stuff.
And by the end of this series, we'll all know a bit more, and I'm really excited. Even me, I'm excited to learn some new things as well as you talk to our guests.
I'm excited. So how does it feel to be the first guest on the first episode of Albertans in Space?
It feels amazing. I can't. I'm excited to share my story, share my passion with folks, and let people know what we're doing, what Alberta's doing, what Calgary's doing in space sector, because it touches our lives every day, and I don't think most people realize it about exactly what we're doing. So let's get into it. So Meghan Westelmajer is an independent Calgary filmmaker with over 15 years experience in production. She's widely recognized for her vast experience in production coordination and in most recent years, assistant production managing in the TV and film industry right here in Alberta, which is booming.
It is booming. We are a small but mighty community, and we're filled with incredible locations and crew, and we've got talent that is, in my opinion, unparalleled, but I'm biased because I'm Calgarian. I'm born and raised here, baby.
And your credits include Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Correct.
Fargo, the TV series. We got Fraggle Rock, Disney's Togo. And when she's not busy working on high-budget studio shows, Meghan can be found working on her independent projects, producing, writing, editing, and directing. Also, she's a painter. And she had this cool painting right here behind us. And all these reasons are exactly why I need you on the show with me.
Thanks, bud. That's quite the introduction. Thank you so much. I wanted to create some set deck for our beautiful space that 6 Degrees Sound of Music has given to us to do this show, giving context to what the series is about. A space helmet, because who doesn't like a space helmet?
It's kind of required in space.
Yeah, it's important.
Yep.
With representing the iconic imagery of Alberta in the big sky, the mountains, the prairie, hay bales, why not? And some wild roses and oil and gas representation, because that's important when we talk about our episode and resources. So, I'm happy to have contributed my painting skills to the podcast.
It's fantastic. And I didn't know that you're going to include the roses here on the bottom. I don't know if you know that I'm a rose gardener. In the attic,
amazing.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
No, I mean, probably last time I had you over for a barbecue, they weren't growing very well, so I've been working on my techniques there. Next time, check them out.
Green thumb, I love it.
Trying to.
You're a busy guy. You got stuff on the go. So I want to talk a little bit about what this episode's going to be about. Your story, as well as what our audience can expect from this season. We've got 8 episodes where we're going to be talking to some pretty incredible people. I want our viewers to see why Albertans in space is important to talk about right now. But before we do that, before we get into the meat of that episode, I want to talk about you. Okay. And I'll give you an incredible bio introduction like you just gave me.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. In 1999, Zach Trolley was just a teenager when his family moved to Calgary, Alberta from Kelowna, BC. After finishing high school, he went on to study at SAIT Polytechnic, where he graduated in electronics engineering. While he found financial freedom and success in the trades, Zach knew that in his heart, he desired so much more for himself. He went back to school to get his engineering degree in 2008. Following his passion, in 2014, he attended the International Space University. There, he learned about all facets of space, from astronauts and rocket scientists. Zach also participated in a simulated Mars mission in Utah back in 2018. The crew of this mission pretends are on Mars, where you can't leave without a spacesuit, and you live within a 30-minute communication delay back to Earth. Another cool anecdote about Zach is that he was shortlisted to be one of the candidates for the Mars One project, a widely publicized and criticized project for its intention of sending a select few non-astronauts on a one-way trip to Mars, in hopes of establishing a first human colony on the Red Planet by 2025. The project ultimately fell through to the disappointment of many Mars and space enthusiasts. Today, Zach Trolley is an electrical engineer, space entrepreneur, and a proud family man with ties still to the space community. Wow, it's impressive. It's impressive all you've done and where you're going.
Oh, thank you.
But I think I can speak for a lot of people who are like, Mars One, what? If you didn't know about Mars One, Zach's going to get to a little bit later once he goes through what our audiences can expect from Albertans in Space Season 1.
So, Meghan, did you know that Alberta has a pretty strong space sector presence?
You know what I didn't know until we started talking about it last year, when we were sitting at your coffee table talking about what we should make. Should we make a doc? Should we do something fun together? So I'm really grateful for Story Hive for allowing us this opportunity to hear ourselves really well on microphones and headsets and do this podcast.
From doctors, engineers, educators, artists, astronauts even, Alberta has space experts who are doing really cool things, and they deserve to be recognized. But first off, to know where we're going, we need to know where we've been, and it's important to understand the history of Canadian involvement in the global space sector. So our second episode, we're going to have Mark Boucher. He's the founder of the Space Q podcast, and he's going to be joining us for episode 102. Canada was actually the third nation in space. Most people don't know that.
I didn't know that.
USSR, USA, and Canada. On our third episode, looking at Earth, we will explain what Earth observation is and how impacts can benefit Calgarians as far as preventing and fighting against natural disasters like floods and wildfires, as well as aiding our province in the fight against impacts of climate change. And joining us for that episode is CEO and co-founder of Wyvern Space, Chris Robson.
They're doing some really cool stuff. Predicting possible disasters has incredible potential to save lives. And so they're doing life-saving work at Wyvern.
And it's one of those things that we use space all the time and don't even realize it. Episode 4 is What Does the Future Hold? Award-winning digital artist Bryan Versteeg will join us to discuss the importance of the human imagination when it comes to designing and engineering habitats and the vital technology needed to make the space livable and sustainable for human beings.
I love that. He puts the A in STEM. So, of course, that would be STEAM, but it's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And then he puts the art in STEAM in STEM because art has a place in science.
Yeah. And, how many people said, I love space because of Star Trek, right? Although that media part, involves people. So it's vitally important. Our 5th episode, called Developing Space Resources, Sean Mitra, CEO and co-founder of Foundation Space Resources. He's going to join us to explain to our audience, to us, what space resources are and what role Alberta can play in it.
I would think that our resource-rich province has experts that have some pretty incredible insights.
I'm really excited for that episode. Our 6th episode, Living and Working in Space, Dr. Michael Gallagher will join us to talk about how to keep humans working and living happy and healthy.
How can one build and keep muscles in zero gravity?
Right? I mean, if we're going to space, we got to be happy out there.
I can barely support my workout regime here. I don't know how we would do it in space.
Well, he's going to tell us. Following our 6th episode, we've got back-to-back doctors keeping astronauts alive and well. And joining us is Dr. Shauna Pandya, and she's going to explain to us the medical technology behind it. So we got Michael talking about, the squishy parts, and we got Shauna talking about the metal electronic parts. It's going to be really, really good. So, and that technology is being developed on Earth for use in space. And when we develop it for space, we use it back on Earth.
She's sure to blow our minds on what it takes to do surgery in space. And maybe she'll talk about her upcoming Virgin Galactic mission, where she's actually going into space.
She's putting the space in the Albertans in Space podcast.
She is super impressive. Can't wait for that one.
And to close out our series, our last episode will be the next generation. And in this episode, we're going to talk about how the next generation of space enthusiasts are learning about space and cultivating their own passion. So joining us will be Amanda Green, a teacher here in Alberta who is very, very passionate about space exploration and deeply involved in fostering that passion in her students.
I'm so excited. The season is going to be truly epic and open people's minds to what Alberta's place in the space conversation is. These people who have triumphed, they've struggled, they've had successes, and they are going to inspire every one of you who is going to watch to reach for the stars or Mars.
Or Mars.
Okay, Zach.
Yes.
It's time to tell your story.
Okay.
When did your passion for space start?
So it's cliche. My passion for space started at a very young age, but it's true. It did. I remember coming home after school and watching Star Trek: The Next Generation, and being fascinated by these people exploring new planets and going to new places. But if I'm being honest, it was actually video games that allowed me to be a space explorer. So I played a lot of, Doom, the original Doom, and Blake Stone. If audience members know that, I'm aging myself
You're
for that.
old. You're very
I
old.
know, I'm old. But it was, these space stations and these areas people built and explored, and I found it fascinating. I love doing that. I loved exploring these areas, and this was in the early 90s, and a few years after these games came out, NASA landed the Pathfinder and Sojourner mission on Mars. And this is this was just when internet came out. So this is brand new internet that we can access. And previous to that, for our younger audience members who may not know, you had to go to the library and get a book out and open it up.
What is a book?
Yeah,
Sorry?
it's pressed trees into internet pages.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And the books that you had in your library was as much information as you could get. You couldn't get more. So, I would go to the school library and pull out these books and see pictures from the 70s when the Vikings landed on Mars, and see these pictures. And when Sojourner, the tiny little rover, it's the size of a remote control car, landed on Mars, you could go to the NASA website and see the pictures, from day one, and they would drive somewhere and you'd see the next pictures, and you would see tracks being put on Mars. And that absolutely fascinated me because, I had remote control cars, and I thought, well, if we can put tracks on Mars, why can't we put footprints? And that's really where my journey started, to figure out what's it going to take to put people on Mars. What does that effort look like?
The Dewey Decimal System in the library?
Yes.
Do you have that?
Yeah. You have to go look that up and figure that out. Another thing for our younger viewers, look that up, what that was. It wasn't as easy as we have it now today.
I think as a kid, every kid has that desire in them to explore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, one of the common, what do you want to be when you grow up answers is astronaut.
Right.
Did you have that? Did you have that
Oh, yeah.
in you to travel to space?
For sure. To be on the Star Trek Enterprise and exploring new lands and new civilizations, that sounds amazing. Then, of course, the reality hits, and they say, well, now you have to do the prerequisites to become an astronaut. And I did try. I started to go looking through that because I think space. I think getting more people into space is one of the most amazing things we could do as a society. When the first person gets to Mars, that will be the biggest achievement we have for the next 1,000 years. So I absolutely want to be a part of that. So I looked into what it takes to be an astronaut, and it's a lot, believe it or not.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, it takes a lot. So I am not great at taking tests. So my marks are not the best. I wouldn't be. I'm not one of those that have 4.0 GPA on their resume. Not me.
Overrated.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't have the many masters or PhDs required. I don't speak the multiple languages. I also get motion sickness.
That's a problem.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of...
I've watched movies. I've seen...
The shaky
pass
cam?
out.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
my God.
Fun fact, though, actually, there's no way to tell who gets motion sickness in space. About half of all astronauts barf when they get to space.
Even if they don't have motion sickness?
Yeah, it just happens. They don't know why. Yeah, so if you look in a mission profile, there's this 3 or 4 hour window after they launch, where they get to the space station or something like that. It's not that it takes 3 or 4 hours. It's just in case someone's barfing. They don't have to they just give them a sec. And
oh
slow
my
down.
God! Inside information.
Yeah,
amazing.
So I had to find my own way, because the astronaut route just wasn't for me. But I didn't want to call it quits there. So I went looking for other ways to be involved in the space sector.
So what advice would you give someone who's interested in being a part of the space sector?
It's to find your own way. Oh, there's the astronauts out there. They've got the right stuff. They're the tough guys and things like that. But behind that, there are the engineers, and they're the scientists, and then there are the educators. There are the promoters. There are people that do all kinds of things in space that we don't even think about. So there are the obvious bits and pieces, and this is why I want to start this podcast, to start talking about all the other things that aren't obvious, and all the other bits and pieces.
Tell us a bit about that. Do you have an example of what you're talking about?
My favorite example, which is a great Calgary example, is Uber.
Calgary.
Well, one of the founding members of one of the founding engineers of Uber is a Calgarian. And
Conrad.
Yeah, Conrad. We used to hang out at the Folk Fest years and years ago. I haven't seen him in a while, though.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But Uber, at its core, is a space technology, and we don't think of it like that. But when you open up the app and you look at your phone, you see a map of you see a map of the cars, and this is all done through GPS, right? That space technology enables all that. Even the time sync between phones. Mine says 2:04, and the guy says 2:04 who's driving the car. That's synced through satellites,
Yeah.
and the credit card transaction is even run through satellites and timestamped to make sure that the money leaves your account that quickly. So the computer programmers and stuff like that they're dealing with it are dealing with space technology, and they're part of the space industry. We live in the space age, and we just forget about it all the time.
How many satellites do you think are in space right now?
There are thousands of satellites in orbit right now, and there are different orbit heights, speeds, different orbital speeds. If we're being very technical on that, because orbit is actually a speed, not a altitude. But I digress. There are thousands of satellites in space that some are looking down on us, some are looking out, some are communication satellites, some look on infrared spectrums, and we use them in our day-to-day life. If space were to disappear tomorrow, we would be in a world of hurt. Going back to our younger audience, how many of you can read a paper map? When I first came to Calgary, my mom was driving and I was the navigator, like turning where to turn.
Go to A5, D6.
Yeah. And flip to the back. God. You know what I'm talking about.
The page is missing. You get lost.
You have to go to the gas station?
Ask for directions?
Yeah. If we lose space, you have to ask for directions again. We can't have that.
So I want to know more about your time at the International Space University. Mm-hmm. What did it take to apply to the program? What did you learn? What was it like?
So first off, the International Space University is a real place. It is a real thing.
So you've said.
Yeah, so I've said. When you have that on a dating profile, you get a lot of questions. I went through that. But it's headquartered in France, and they move their courses to different places in the world every year. They do completely embrace that international quality. So what I did what's called the Space Studies program. And it's a crash course in everything space. And I've known about this. I knew about it for years. I heard about people who graduated who went there, and they basically tell you everything about space through the history, through the engineering, through the politics, through the science, through everything. So you have an understanding of exactly how it works. So I had wanted to go there forever. And in 2014, it was actually in Montreal. And I thought, well, this is my chance. I need to apply. And to my great surprise, I was accepted. So to get accepted, you need at least a bachelor's degree, and more than half have a bachelor's and everyone else has master's or PhDs. Like these are smart people. Mm-hmm. Astronauts even go as students to this program. So when you're in this program, you are taught by the people that did it. So we were doing a class on like the Hubble telescope, and the guy telling us about the Hubble telescope was the man who did the spacewalk to fix the mirrors. He was the one that did it.
Wow.
When we were learning about space history, it was by people that were in the NASA administration. And they weren't telling us, hearsay. They were telling us what happened in the room because they were there when it happened.
Oh my God, that must have been so cool.
It was amazing. I would be sitting next to a guy in class and he's on his laptop and I'm like, well, what are you looking at? And he's like, oh, I built this satellite and it's launching right now. I'm watching the live stream of the satellite that I built, launch. I'm like, are you serious? Yeah.
So
crazy.
From not having any space involvement to having all of this coming at you, how did that make you feel?
It was night and day. And I think anybody that's ever done an extreme, course like that, because it was about 9 weeks long, 10 to 14 hour days, super intense, super smart people doing amazing things. Is I hate to use the metaphor, but drinking from a fire hose, and coming back was an extraordinary experience too, because you just see things differently because you know how things work now. You it's like understanding how the sausage is made. And you're like, wow, but this time you're not grossed out by it. Like, I want more sausage.
What impact does Calgary have in the space sector right now, in your opinion?
So I love that question, and we're actually going to answer that question all through this season. I think, up until this point, Calgary and Alberta have actually played a lot larger role in space than most people know about, and I'm hoping to increase that. That's why we're here. That's why we're talking. But the University of Calgary receives an enormous amount of funding in space research and is involved in a lot of space research. The students there are starting to build their own satellites. The University of Calgary is launching their own satellites, which is absolutely amazing.
Totally cool.
In the university, they have a robotic arm called the neuro arm, and we'll hear about more of this when we talk to Shauna Pandya. But it's a robotic arm built on the technology from the Canada arm, and it does surgery inside an MRI when the MRI machine is operating. Like, this is space age stuff.
My mind is blown.
Right? So, we're doing all these things, and it's important to talk about them and let people know that that they can do it too, right? That space is for everybody, and that they can be a part of this industry as well.
How involved are we as Albertans on an international level?
Really high. All these things that the universities are doing is in a international capacity, that how research works, presenting papers, et cetera, but we're starting to branch out from there. When we talked to Sean from Foundation Space Resources, like he's been working on the law and the regulations on space mining, and how that works. Some of the work that he's done has been presented to the United Nations in some of their papers to figure out how are we going to do regulation regimes moving forward, and Alberta having some of the best energy regulations in the world. I think it's a great model, the Canadian and the Alberta model, to bring forward.
Let's dig into the Mars One project. Mm-hmm. What were your ideas about doing this adventure and leaving on a one-way trip to Mars?
So when Mars One was announced, this would have been 2010-ish, around there. It was this far-fetched plan, but it was the first time that people were involved. And space up to that point had been, okay, you get your PhD, become a fighter pilot, and you go get your government contract, and there's a very clear pathway towards this. And the analogy I like to use is, if you imagine the Europeans when they were traveling from Europe to North America, or even within North America going east to west. There are certain people that go out, the cartographers, the explorers. They go out and they map the land, and they figure out where things are. Or the sailors, they know how to sail a ship. Those are your astronauts. But they're not people that build towns. They're not people that build villages or build communities. You want farmers, you want blacksmiths, you want merchants, right? That's what builds a community. So Mars One was the first effort to try and do that, figure out what it takes to build a community, an operational, settlement on Mars. And that was a brand new idea. I mean, it had been written about in science fiction, but never put to practice. That was the first time it came up, and it shocked a lot of people to try and think of it that way. And when that call came out to say, we're taking anybody, like just, apply and see how it goes, I got people from all over the place, emailing me and texting me saying, I saw this. Are you applying? Because everyone knew I love space. And I don't want to say I was bullied into it, but people said, this is your shot. Like, this is it. I applied, and you actually helped me put my application video together.
I did, and I used it to apply to the Story Hive.
Use that. That was our part of the application.
Pitch. So yeah, who knew it was going to come back? Full force 10 years later.
We were working on space stuff for a bit of a hiatus in between, but about 10 years.
And you made it pretty far. Like, how far did you make it in the process?
Made it past the first cut of individuals. So, if memory serves, I was there was 700-ish candidates, and they were cutting it down to 100, and I didn't make it on that cut to 100, but it was fascinating to me. Like I said, I was a passive observer of space up until that point, and when I was shortlisted, I was thrust into the spotlight. TV stations were calling me, radio stations were calling me, and all of a sudden they were saying, oh, here's Zach Trolley, future Mars colonist, and I was expected to know all these things and basically be a spokesperson for the company, and it was a lot. It was pretty intense.
I can only imagine. You're basically thrust into the spotlight and people asking you questions like, why would you do this? Why would you leave your loved ones? Are you psychotic? And your answer was yes.
I mean, it's funny if you say that, but people have opinions. I mean, we all know that.
Yes.
And when it's something big and it's something divisive like that, people have strong opinions about those things, and they were not shy about telling me about their strong opinions.
Yeah, I remember that being a bit overwhelming in the whole process, and of course, it's scary to be under the impression, especially because you got super far in the process, that you would be going to Mars one day. And then knowing that people had mixed feelings about it must have been a challenge for you.
It was, and people would get angry, which I found which I found fascinating. They I would have mothers too would come to me, and I would be in a talk or in public, and they would say, "How dare you? What does your mother think about this?"
What did your mother think about it?
I'm sure she was, she was upset. Obviously, it wasn't her favorite thing in the world, but she understood what I was doing, and she knew what it was. Mars One never tried to trick anybody. Everyone was fully informed of what was going on, and what I find really interesting is that when I was younger, I was actually in the military reserves, and nobody got upset with me when I told them I was a soldier, but when I told them I wanted to be an explorer, all of a sudden that blew their mind, and it took so long for them to wrap their heads around it. I actually started taking my mom with me to like these events, and when someone bring that question, because it always showed up, I would say, "Well, my mom's right here. You can ask her herself."
Wow, that's amazing. So, what are your thoughts on Mars One falling through?
So, space is hard, and anybody in the space industry will tell you that it is not easy, and there are lots of companies, lots of things that have fallen through and not worked through. But Mars One had always been honest in their approach. I mean, it didn't work out for various reasons. One of them being how hostile the incumbents were to this new idea. And that's nothing new, and that's not unique to Mars One. If you go back in the archives, you can see how hostile people were to SpaceX when they first came up. And
Mars One was pre-SpaceX.
It was around the same time. So SpaceX started a little bit earlier. But they were failing. Their rockets were exploding, and they were doing up. So, SpaceX was just taking off. People were just understanding who they were kind of the same time that Mars One came up. And maybe there's too many new things at the time for people to kind of digest. But what it did was it changed the conversation, and the conversation has stayed changed. So I think the great thing that Mars One did is it allowed the public to kind of digest that information of people going to Mars, going to the moon, what that's going to take, and what the reality of that is. And I think that's paved the way for where we are right now with the Artemis missions, and you hear talk of space hotels and other infrastructure, and it doesn't seem that strange anymore. And I think that's a cultural turning point for us there.
Totally, because I always thought that space, was government run and not belonging to everybody. But you're saying that space does belong to everyone.
And that's, I think, that mind shift that, people are going, right? And it's what can we do as a people, and what that's going to take, rather than militaries and governments deciding what space is going to be like. We can decide what space is going to be like, and what our future holds.
Power rests in the people.
Mm-hmm.
Are there lessons to learn from the experience of Mars One, and would they try it again?
I can't speak for the people that organize it and stuff like that, but the obvious lesson here is space is hard. I'll say it again, but to go slow and steady. These are things. This is an endurance race. You have to be ready for the long haul, and there's a lot of politics involved because space is inherently international. It involves many companies, many people, many aspects of that. And I think what happened with Mars One is they were just expecting people to get on board, and they didn't. And that's a many different combination of things. But when you get into space, you need to embrace criticism of what's happening, because there are so many different facets of what's happening, from the technical side to the psychological side to the cultural side, of what's happening in space. I mean, one of the big things that is going on right now with the Artemis missions is that an international group of folks are heading back to the moon.
That's what the Artemis
mission, yes. It's U.S., Canada, Australia, South Korea, Japan, a bunch of countries are getting together and saying we're gonna all build a mission to go back to the moon. And in fact, the Artemis 2 mission has a Canadian on it. So we're gonna have a Canadian around the moon, which is very exciting.
Maybe we'll get him for season 2.
But that the moon is a hugely culturally significant part of our lives, right? Everybody on Earth looks up and can see the moon. So how do we treat the moon properly? How do we, when we land there and we start building and we start living there with a permanent presence, which, I mean, you can't own the moon, right? Unless we're in some crazy science fiction movie here, which we don't want to be. We want to stay away from the dystopias. But it's a real legitimate question. You start talking about those questions.
To just expand on that, it just leads you to so many different facets, and we can talk about that with our guests. But sustainability and doing it right, and not necessarily
so important.
Yeah, treating the moon like we've treated Earth, especially because the moon is so important to Earth and how Earth works.
Yes,
right.
It does. Yeah. We're in a symbiotic relationship there with the moon, so we're not in danger of like deorbiting it or anything like that. But I mean, we don't want advertisements on the moon. We don't want a giant McDonald's sign up there.
How did you get involved with the Mars simulation in Utah?
The Mars Desert Research Station in Utah has been one of those things growing up that I've always wanted to go see and wanted to be involved with. And they've been running that for about 20 years. And the idea is you go there and pretend that you're on Mars as much as possible. I mean, we can't change the gravity. We can't actually take oxygen out of the air. But you go through the motions and learn. It's kind of like if anybody works in oil and gas here, you learn things by going to site that you wouldn't learn in the office. So that's kind of what like pretending you were on Mars. And
so cool.
I got an invite to actually go through the International Space University, because every year they field a team that goes out there for 2 weeks. So I was actually on the alternate team, and the lead engineer of the time, he was a NASA engineer, and there was a NASA mission he had to go on, so he couldn't go. So I was actually pulled up from the alternate to the primary team, which, I mean, I was stoked about. And that's how I got that spot. And yeah, traveled down to Utah in 2018 to play Martian for 2 weeks.
Did you feel like you were on Mars, or did you always in the back of your mind go, I'm not on Mars, I'm on Earth still?
So you think that, you're like, oh, we're just playing pretend, it's no big deal. But you couldn't go outside without a spacesuit on. We're eating freeze-dried food. There's that time lag where we're emailing back and forth and we can't directly communicate. And after a day or two, I remember I was out walking on Mars. I had the spacesuit, on, and had the radio in my ear and just kind of hear the hissing. And you're fully covered, so I couldn't feel the wind. I couldn't actually touch rocks. There was a barrier between me and the environment. And there's a point where it actually kind of it clicks, and you actually start to feel weird because you've been isolated from the environment for a couple days. and you can only see outside through through the window or through a visor, and you start to actually feel like you're there. It's really weird.
That is really cool. So what's the purpose of doing this?
So they do different experiments or missions when they go down there, and they usually have a thesis that they bring down. So there'll be people that will be testing different kind of remote control rovers, or a different process, or a different way of doing things while we're there. So one of the experiments that we were doing while we were there was how much dust your spacesuits accumulate when you're out walking around when you come back in. So whether you're on the moon or Mars, dust is a big problem because it gets into seals, it gets into machinery, and it will gum things up. So we would go out and we would play around the dust and jump around or whatever, and go out, do some geology surveys and come back, and we would set sensors up inside our mock airlock and measure how much dust would come off of us while we were waiting in this airlock, just to start to get an idea of how much dust is moving in around when we bring it back into the habitat. The other thing we were doing was spacesuit mobility. So we had some parts of spacesuits. We had a glove, and we had some other bits and pieces that we were practicing on mobility. So it would be, okay, moving around with no gloves, moving around with some gloves, moving around with these spacesuits. What is your range of mobility? How easy is it to pick up and grab things? How easy is it to do things? And we actually did, we call it the Mars Olympics, and we set up these. We did a sprint. We did some rhythm dancing. We did some events out there, just to see how movement operates. Because if you imagine you're on Mars, you're trying to pick things up, you're trying to move things around. Being able to move is critical. So these, what they're called analog stations, MDRS being one. There's one in northern Canada. There's one in Hawaii. There's one in Poland. They're kind of all over the world. They're all set up a bit differently, but basically to dry run and test all these systems and scenarios that, testing them on Mars is really, really expensive.
You've had your hand in starting your own space company. Tell us about that.
Since 2018, I've been trying to figure out how we can involve Alberta in the space industry, in the space sector, bringing everything we learned in oil and gas, in dealing in remote environments, in dealing in harsh environments, even the way we do modularization in the way we manufacture things. Those are all skills that are needed in the space industry. So about 4 years ago, I helped start a company to look how to sustainably develop space resources for use in space, and find ways that we can take Alberta's skill sets and move them to different industries, because we have so much talent here and so many skill sets.
And being able to say that we do have some incredible people that can contribute to the conversation is similar to that of Armageddon, my favorite space movie. Also took people who were good at what they did. They were good at oil and gas. They were drillers, and they got to be sent to this asteroid to blow it up. I mean, again, hopefully that doesn't happen, but it goes to show that anyone could do it. If you're good at what you do, you can participate in the conversation and explore beyond.
There are many things that are not scientifically accurate in that movie.
I would imagine everything is not scientifically accurate. This is what I know. This is how I learn. Final question. Why is it important for us to talk about space right now?
I think we always forget that we are living in the space age. It is baked into everything that we do, whether it's GPS satellites or weather, or I mentioned banking. It is in everything that we do, and it's paramount that we understand that, not only so we know what's going on, so that we help people get into that industry and build it up and go further. But more than that, I mean, space is a unforgiving environment. So we learn so much about how to do things on Earth when we go to space and we explore space. There's the old thing like, oh, we got Tang from space, or Velcro, we have Velcro from space. But we have really important things like how to do welding of big tanks. Like when they were building the tanks for the space shuttle, they pioneered a brand new way of doing welding, and that's now ubiquitous in the way that we do manufacturing. And we learn so many ways of doing things because it's hard, because it's really difficult. We have to figure out new ways of doing things. And the more we do that, the more we do those things in space, the better we get doing things on Earth. And now more than ever, we need to, really understand what our impact is on Earth and what our impact could be in space. So, an example for our audience, there are the Starlink satellites that SpaceX is putting up. That basically means anybody can throw a Starlink, satellite dish on their RV or wherever, and then get internet. You can get internet anywhere in the world now. The downside to that is we have thousands and thousands of satellites in orbit that could contribute to what's called space junk. So if you've seen the movie Gravity, where, Sandra Bullock has this big cloud of debris coming at it, that's a real thing. The International Space Station has armor on one side of it, and it routinely moves out of the way of space debris and space junk so it doesn't get hit. And being aware of that and knowing that it's entirely possible we could actually build so much junk up there that we can't go into space anymore is a very real thing.
I think that's a big thing for people to understand, is doing the research, not just escape this Earth, but to better it.
Environmentalism and things like that is, baked into what we do, right? It's just something that we do. But it wasn't always the case. And one of the catalysts was actually in the 1970s when we got pictures back of Earth. And for the first time, we could see Earth as this fragile little ball floating through space. And it kind of, culturally clicked to people that, oh my gosh, like this is planet Earth. It's the only one we've got. We got to take care of it. And I think when we go to space, one of the great benefits is being able to look back at ourselves and see the Earth and see what it is and take care of it better. And I think that is one of the true gifts of going into space.
Well, let's go to space.
Let's do it.
Well, we could talk for probably hours and days about your story, but I think that where you've come, where you are now, what an incredible story that I'm really happy that we got to share with our viewers of season 1. Thank you so much for being the first guest on episode 1, season 1 of Albertans in Space. Life is meant to challenge and inspire, test us, and allow us to explore what we know and what we still have yet to know. Education and exploration is what this podcast is all about. I can't wait to talk with our Albertan space experts over the next few episodes. Thank you for sharing your story and your love of space with us. Big thanks to Sandralynn with her writing and research efforts, Nick, our sound engineer, 6 Degrees Music and Sound, and Dan, our DOP camera operator, for helping us make this podcast look and sound amazing. And thank you for helping me bring this idea to life. I really enjoyed our talk today and a little trip down memory lane, actually. And thank you so much for watching Albertans in Space. We hope you guys tune in. Please make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a like. We appreciate your support. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, @AlbertansInSpace_podcast. Goodbye for now, and tune in next week when we'll talk to Mark Boucher about the history of space and the current ongoing projects happening right here in Alberta.